Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I'm a licensed naturopathic physician, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I've dedicated my life to helping other women with migraines rediscover a migraine-free life. So welcome back to the podcast, everyone. So I want to talk about something that I call vitality draining mental and emotional dynamics. And I want to make an argument, because if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know I like to make an argument, that this may be one of the most important and most overlooked pieces of the migraine puzzle. So I want to start off with a story. So before I became a naturopathic doctor, I had a whole nother career. I worked in corporate training and development. I actually have a master's in training and development. So I spent years working for large companies on big training and development projects, workshops, curriculum design, stakeholder engagement, the whole thing. And in that career, I became close friends with a woman I'll call my coworker. She was one of the most talented instructional designers I have ever worked with. And I don't say that casually. I've worked with a lot of great people in that field. She was particularly creative. She was grounded in the science of adult education. She could design a program, facilitate a meeting, manage stakeholders, and she did it effortlessly. And everybody knew it. She was consistently recognized for her work, and she deserved every bit of it. And, as we started to get closer in the way that you do, become close with coworkers, she started confiding in me, and I started to hear something over and over again. So, she facilitated an important stakeholder meeting. I was in the room too. And afterwards, she told me, our boss didn't say anything about the job that I did. Not one word. I worked so hard to put that together. And, can you believe our boss never said anything to me about it? Just, like a little, pat on the back. So she was shocked, because our manager was someone who really went out of his way to recognize people. But this time, nothing. So then, a little while later, another, big project, right? So she worked, 60-hour weeks for 4 weeks straight, late nights, weekends, missed date nights with her husband, right? She worked more than anybody else on the team, way more than I would have. And afterwards, right, this is what I heard, no one appreciated all of the work that I put into that. No one said thank you. And then, she told me about Thanksgiving. She had worked so hard to prepare, beautiful meal for her family, bringing over, not just the bare minimum to the potluck, right? I'll just bring the rolls, right? Oh no, she was, making multiple dishes. Not one person told her the food was good. Nobody thanked her for bringing the food over. So, now, hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client, Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. I mean, I want to be clear, I believed her. I mean, I was her friend, and I only had her account of these things, but I believed her. I had no reason not to. And the more that I heard, the more that I started to get riled up on her behalf. I'm starting to get indignant. What's wrong with these people? She's got all these people. What's wrong with our boss, right? He's recognizing everybody else. He can't say anything to her. What's wrong with her family? Nobody in her family can even say a thank you. Is that so hard to just say a thank you? But also, this is the other part of this that got to be so painful when she would tell me these stories. I mean, she wasn't sad. She was angry, very, very angry, very indignant. And she would say things like, you know what, if these people aren't going to appreciate me, then I'm not going to work so hard. If this company doesn't care, then I don't care about this company. I'm done going above and beyond for people who can't even say thank you. And I would be like, yeah, good for you, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more. Boundaries, work-life balance, this is just a big corporation. We're just a cog in the wheel at the end of the day. I was like, you go, stand up for yourself, right? Except the next project would come and we're back to, 60-hour weeks every time. So now we come to the end of the year holiday luncheon, right? We've got the whole department, the leadership. We're in a real nice, fancy restaurant, catered lunch. We've got the annual, recognition speeches and, awards that are given out to the team. And what do you know? My friend got every accolade she deserved. The leadership spoke about her at length because she was fantastic. She was the star. She was great. People are clapping, right? I was so relieved. I was so happy for her. Finally, right? She's being recognized, I was just thrilled. So we leave the luncheon and she turns to me and she says, I can't believe the VP didn't mention the work I did on that one project. And that was the moment that I understood something. And I want to be very careful here because I'm not diagnosing my friend. I don't know what was going on inside of her. I cannot read her mind, and I would never presume to. And I have nothing but compassion for her because what I was watching was someone who was genuinely suffering. And here's what made it so painful and so confusing for her. As far as she could tell, she was just very, very unlucky. She was, for some reason that she could not explain, the one person on our team, the one person in her family, the one person in her life who never got recognized no matter what she did. That was her experience of it. So it's not like she was going around saying, I've got this unconscious wound or, I've got this unconscious trauma that makes me scan for evidence at work and within my family and within my friendships, makes me scan for evidence of not being appreciated. That's not what she was living, right? What she was living is, why does this keep happening to me? And why am I always the one that nobody sees? And that's what unconscious means. The wound doesn't announce itself, right? It doesn't say, I'm going to distort your perception of reality. It just shows up as reality, as bad luck, as a pattern that keeps happening through no fault of her own that she cannot explain. And the anger, the threats to stop caring, to stop working so hard, that wasn't her like giving up. That was her fighting back. That was someone who cared so much that she couldn't stop, raging against the fact that she couldn't stop. She didn't want to work 70-hour weeks for people that didn't appreciate her. She genuinely didn't want to. And she genuinely couldn't help it because whatever was inside of her needed something that the work was trying and failing to provide. That is an example of a hole in the vitality bucket. And it doesn't care how many times you swear you're done caring. And again, I want to be really clear about something here because I don't want this to be misunderstood. I'm not saying don't work 60-hour weeks. I'm not saying don't give everything you've got to something. Look, I'll be honest with you. I put in a lot of time to make this podcast for you guys. A lot of Saturdays, a lot of extra hours. A lot of hours that, maybe some people would say I shouldn't spare or I shouldn't dedicate to it. And I don't have 1 minute of resentment doing it because I love doing this. The work is its own reward. I wouldn't put it down if I tried. And that's the difference. If my coworker, if my friend had come to me and said, Leslie, I just put in 4 60-hour weeks on this project and I couldn't have felt more alive. The work was so good. I just loved it. I couldn't have stopped. The work was so good. I loved it. It was so rewarding. I got so much out of it. I would have said, great, good for you. It's not a problem. That's not draining anything. But that's not what she said. She was angry. She was ranting. She was raving. She was hurt. She was furious. Why am I putting all of this time into a company that won't even acknowledge me? That resentment? That's the tell. That's the body keeping the score, the tab. Every hour she put in feeling like that was a withdrawal from the vitality bucket, not a deposit. The work was not filling her up. It was emptying her out because she wasn't doing it because she loved it. She was doing it because inside her needed something back. That's the hole. So this is not a biochemistry problem that happens to have emotional symptoms. This is a human problem that shows up in the biochemistry. And to understand why, really understand why, I want to give you a framework that I use with all of my clients, and I call it the compass needle. So imagine a compass needle that we have a little internal compass needle inside of us. So when that needle is pointing north, we're in a state of health. Our body is functioning properly. It's in a state of homeostasis, health. We're in the green zone, right? Things are functioning the way that they're designed to function. Our body is not generating symptoms. That's what north is. That's where we want to live. But that needle is getting pushed down constantly. Physical stressors push it down towards west. So like a bad flu, a bronchitis, a car accident, a surgery, those are major physical stressors. The barometric pressure dropping, the August sun, a meal you skipped, a night you didn't sleep. Those are also physical stressors that are pushing that compass needle down towards west. So every sensory input, everything your body has to process is pushing that needle down. And then there are, mental and emotional stressors, things that we call stress, work conflicts, relationship conflicts, grief, worry. Those are pushing the needle down too. When the needle drops down far enough, sort of towards that northwest side of the dial, it enters what I call the symptom zone. And that's when the body starts generating symptoms. Now, what symptoms? That depends on your genetics, your individual predisposition. For you and me, when our needle drops into that northwest side of the dial, that drops into our migraine zone. So for someone else, it might be, allergies or heartburn or prediabetes or an autoimmune condition or joint pain. For you and me, that's migraines. So what determines whether that needle bounces back up to north or stays down in the symptom zone or our migraine zone? It's your or our resiliency and vitality. So this is the third principle that I talk about. I talk about the three principles, the three things that your body needs to restore itself back to health and maintain its state of health. So this aspect is what I call the third principle. Again, when our needle is in the green zone, we feel good and our body doesn't generate symptoms. We're, if you will, in a state of health. But that needle is continuously getting pushed down towards west by stressors. It's our own resiliency and vitality that counters that and pushes the needle back up to north. If it can't do that, then the needle stays pointing northwest and then we have symptoms. So I like to think of this like we have like a vitality bucket inside of us, okay? So the fuller the bucket, the more vitality, the more power you have to push the needle back up when life knocks it down. The lower the bucket, the emptier the bucket, the lower your resiliency and vitality, right? Your needle is going to get pushed down by stressors, and then you're going to have a hard time pushing it back up, and then you're going to go into your symptom zone, your migraine zone. You're going to get a migraine. And so here's what I want you to understand. There are things draining that vitality bucket that you may not even know about. So holes in the bottom of that bucket that you've been aware of your whole life potentially. And that's where my coworker story becomes not just a sad story about a woman I used to work with, but possibly your story too. Before I tell you about what those holes are, I want to talk about why you haven't been able to fix this, even if you've been doing everything right. Because you might be someone who does a lot of things right. You might get sunlight in the morning. You might do red light therapy. Maybe you've tried acupuncture, homeopathy, magnesium, CoQ10. You watch what you eat. You sleep 8 hours. You have a whole stack of healthy habits and you follow them. And all of that genuinely adds to our vitality bucket. We can add to the vitality bucket with our health supporting habits or actions. So, getting sunlight adds vitality to the bucket. Red light, because that's red light therapy is using a technology now that mimics the spectrum of sunlight, but that will add to the vitality bucket. Acupuncture, homeopathy, being mindful of our stress, those add vitality to the bucket as well. But if there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket, you're never going to fill that bucket up. You're trying to pour things into the top as fast as you can, and it's just running right out of the bottom. That's why you're not getting anywhere. So, we particularly as migraine sufferers, we can really feel this. We can really feel this phenomenon. We can kind of feel like, I'm just right on the verge of getting a migraine. I call that the uh-oh moment, right? When the needle first starts to go into our migraine zone and we go, uh-oh, I feel something, right? That's what I call the uh-oh moment. So when we're prone to migraines, we're prone to a condition where you can really kind of get a feel for where your needle is, unlike other conditions that don't generate such obvious symptoms. A lot of migraine sufferers, they'll start to realize, I'm kind of getting drained here and I want to slow the drain, right? I want to try not to be drained so quickly. And this is what the advice is given when we're talking about things like spoon theory, raising your threshold, a lot of what's becoming more and more mainstream way of talking about this phenomenon that migraine sufferers are particularly attuned to. So you try to slow the drain, right? So, maybe you're meditating, you're doing deep breathing, heart rate variability training, brain retraining programs. These things, they're real and they can have a positive effect, but they're trying to slow down the stress response. They're trying to bring down the cortisol. And like I say, they can help, but here's the problem. Those tools operate at the level of the nervous system response. So they're downstream. They're trying to manage what's coming out of the drain hole. They're not touching the hole itself, because the hole is not in the nervous system. It's in the pattern. It's in the dynamic. It's in the thing that's been running below the surface, below conscious awareness. And like I say, maybe your whole life. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client, Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month. And as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do, but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes, and on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. And this is why people say, I do everything right. I mean, especially migraine sufferers, right? I do everything right. I eat clean. I'm diligent with my sleep. I meditate. I manage my stress, and I still get migraines. Yes, because the bucket has a hole in it, and until you find the hole and you patch it up, you will be pouring things into the top indefinitely and wondering why the bucket never fills up. So what are the holes? Okay. Because my coworker's dynamic is one example of one specific type of hole, and I don't want you to hear that story and think, well, I'm not like that. I don't have that particular issue. This isn't about me. Just stay with me here, because in 9 years of working exclusively with women with migraines, I have found that there are recurring patterns. These dynamics show up again and again in my clients and also in me. I'm not an exception to this. So let me walk you through them. I want you to really listen to this, and I want you to notice if anything lands for you. So the first I'd call the conscientiousness cluster. We don't call it perfectionism. We like to say, oh, well, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right? It's not perfectionism. I just like to do it properly. So this could look like, redoing other people's work because we can't leave it the way they did it. We can't leave the dishes in the sink even though we're exhausted. We notice what's wrong in a room before we notice what's right in a room. We struggle to delegate because nobody else is going to do it to the right standard, so I might as well just do it myself. And when something is left unfinished, there's actual physical discomfort that won't leave us alone. Does any of that land for you? So the second cluster, this is what I call the fixer and the mediator. We feel tension in a room before anyone else does. So we jump in, we smooth things over before a conflict erupts. We apologize when we are not wrong, just to de-escalate, just to bring the temperature down. Okay, I'll take the hit. Let me just keep everything nice. We take on the emotional labor of keeping the peace in relationships and family at work. We feel responsible for other people's moods. We can't fully relax at a family gathering if someone in the room is unhappy. We are the one everyone calls when something goes wrong. Any of that hit for you? The third cluster, this is the overgiver, the overdoer. So we work harder than anyone else in the room. We say yes when we mean no. We give more than we have and then we collapse. We anticipate other people's needs before they ask. We feel guilty resting when there is still something that needs doing. We measure our worth by what we produce. Any of that hit for you? The fourth cluster, and this is what I saw in my coworker, the validation loop. We work twice as hard hoping someone will notice. We track whether our effort was acknowledged. A genuine thank you lands, but boy, does it fade fast. The next project starts and the cycle begins all over again. And we feel deflated when our contribution is taken for granted. A brief thank you feels insincere. Any of that land for you? And then the fifth sort of cluster, I call this the walking on eggshells cluster. So this is where we rehearse conversations before we have them. Or we might think through how someone might react and adjust what we're going to say before we even open our mouths. We're monitoring the emotional temperature of everyone around us constantly, and we find it hard to relax around certain people. We feel relief when a tense situation passes and then immediately start scanning for the next one. So does any of those hit for you? So just look at all of that. Just feel all of that. The vigilance alone is exhausting, and it doesn't turn off at 5 o'clock. This runs all day, every day, at work, at home, at the Thanksgiving dinner. And I want to be really direct because I don't want you to miss this. These are not just dynamics that happen to drain your vitality bucket. These dynamics are the holes in your vitality bucket, not a metaphor, not a loose connection. Each one of these patterns, the conscientiousness that won't let you rest, the fixer who can't leave other people's emotions alone, the overdoer who says yes when she means no, the validation loop that keeps the tab open, the eggshell walker who is always scanning for the next threat. Each one is a continuous low-grade drain built into the bottom of the bucket. Not running because of a bad week, running because it's been how you've operated probably for most of your life. And you probably just think it's your personality. You probably just think, well, I was wired this way. And this is why the bucket stays empty while you do everything right. This is the answer to, I eat clean, I sleep 8 hours, I meditate, I take my supplements, I still get migraines. The things you are doing are real. They do have some ability to fill the bucket, but the drain outpaces them because the drain never stops flowing. The hole is open 24 hours a day. Meditation doesn't reach it. Deep breathing doesn't reach it. Brain retraining doesn't reach it. Not because those are bad tools. They're not. But because they're working on the stress response, and the stress response is downstream of the hole. The hole is the pattern. The hole is the dynamic, and it will keep running until it's seen. And this is what this work is actually about. And so I want to say something directly to anyone who just heard themselves in that list, who heard one of those descriptions and felt their stomach drop a little. Oh, right? That's me. That is exactly me. and I've never connected it to my migraines. I hear you, and I want you to know you're not weak for having these patterns. You're not broken. You've been carrying something, probably for a long time, that nobody ever helped you name. And the fact that it's been draining your vitality bucket, draining your resiliency, making your needle hard to push back to north, that's not your fault. It's just something that nobody told you to look at. You're not going to get this on a functional medicine lab test or supplement protocol. And I'm still working on this myself. I still catch myself slipping. These patterns don't disappear overnight, but they do change. And that matters more than I can tell you. Now, before I go any further, I know what some of you are thinking. All right, Dr. Leslie, so what you're saying is I need to stop caring, stop helping, stop being conscientious, turn into someone who couldn't give a damn about anyone. No, that's not what I'm saying. Not even close. Health is a state of balance. There's a difference between being helpful and draining yourself at 3 o'clock in the morning wondering if you were helpful enough. There's a difference between caring about your work and running 60-hour weeks trying to solve a problem that the work will never solve. There's a difference between being a good mediator and feeling personally responsible for everyone else's emotional state. Caring is not the problem. The compulsiveness of it is. And the compulsiveness has a source, and the source can be found. And when it's found, the needle gets to stay north a little bit longer. Now, let me talk about what all of this actually costs you biochemically, because I know this is what you want to understand. And so, again, your mind might be going to, okay, Dr. Leslie, stress causes cortisol. Cortisol adds to the toxin bucket. The bucket tips over. I got a migraine. I know you've already talked about this. And all of that biochemistry is true, but I want to say something in defense of cortisol today, because cortisol gets a terrible reputation, and I think that that is wrong. So cortisol is not the enemy. Cortisol is what gets you through. It's what allows you to function under stress, to stay sharp in a difficult meeting, to push through a late night, and to get up and do it all over again the next day. Without cortisol, you'd fall apart the moment things got hard. Cortisol is the body being loyal to you. Now, if you had asked my coworker where her stress was coming from, she would have said, the deadline, the project, the 60-hour week. That's what's stressful. Of course I'm making cortisol. And she would have been completely sincere, because that's what it looked like from the inside. But that's not correct. The deadline didn't make her work 70 hours. Plenty of people on the team had the same deadline and went home at 5 p.m. What made her work 70 hours is that something inside of her needed to. A hole that was screaming for recognition and validation that could never be filled. That was the source of the stress. The deadline was just the vehicle. The cortisol was not serving the project. It was serving the hole. It's what kept her up until 2 a.m. working. It's what got her back to her desk on Saturday morning, loyal all the way to the end to something that was never going to be satisfied. The problem is not that she was making cortisol. The problem is that the thing calling for the cortisol never resolved, so the cortisol never stopped. It just kept running on a treadmill with no off switch because the underlying wound kept requiring it. And that is why you cannot supplement your way out of this. You've probably seen products marketed for cortisol support. Ashwagandha, phosphatidylserine. There are supplements specifically designed to suppress cortisol production. And maybe they do bring the numbers down a little bit. But the thing that needed the cortisol is still there, still running, still generating the demand. You haven't touched it. You just muted the response to the wound. And that is the same structural error that taking a triptan for a migraine is. You've suppressed the signal, but the source is completely untouched. No amount of deep breathing fixes this either. No mantra. No one saying to you, just let it go. It's just a job. Why do you care so much? In my friend's conscious mind, she probably would have agreed. Of course I shouldn't care so much. And then the next deadline would arrive and she'd be back to 70-hour weeks. Because the conscious mind is not where this lives. You cannot breathe your way out of a wound you cannot see. You cannot supplement it down. You cannot meditate it away. And you cannot work hard enough to fill it. Now, here's something I need to address directly because someone is listening that is going to say, okay, but what if I really am in an environment where I'm not being recognized? What if the politics at work are genuinely unfair and the recognition really isn't coming? That's not in my head, that's real. And listen, I totally hear you. I've been in exactly that situation. I've been in corporate environments where because of the politics in the department, it didn't matter what I produced. I was not going to be seen or recognized. In fact, I was going to be punished. And I'm not just talking about being overlooked, like I'm talking about actively sabotaged. I've done good work and had it buried because of a political battle between my VP and another VP that had nothing to do with me. I found out years later, a former coworker came to me and said, I've always felt bad about this, but, my VP hated your VP and you got caught in the middle. So that happens. I know it happens because it happened to me. So, maybe my coworker was right. Maybe she really was the unlucky one. Maybe the recognition genuinely wasn't there. Here is what I found. It doesn't matter. And I mean that clinically. Not dismissively. Because here's what I've observed. Put two people in the exact same unfair, political, recognition-starved environment. One of them has this hole, and that environment, it destroys her. She works herself into the ground. She gets angry, resentful, maybe vindictive. Maybe she does things later that she regrets because she was fighting so hard for something that she cannot get and not stop needing. The cortisol is running constantly. The vitality bucket is draining. The needle stays down. The other person, no hole, looks at the same situation and thinks, oh, I see what's going on here. This isn't fair. It's not pleasant. And it's not about me. That person, she's not thrilled. But it doesn't reach her the same way. It doesn't have anywhere to land. Her needle bounces back. The hole is the variable, not the manager, not the politics, not whether the recognition was real or not. The hole is what determines what the external world costs you. So now I'm going to tell you what I hear from nearly every client when we start getting into this territory. Hi there. I want to jump in real quick and tell you about my client Beth. She was getting 15 to 20 migraines and headaches per month, and as you can imagine, this was impacting her work performance and her confidence. She also has 2 small children, and she was starting to feel like she was a horrible mom because she had nothing left for them at the end of the day. But she reached out and she booked a free consult call with me, and after I asked her about her migraines and her health history, I felt confident that I could help her. I help women uncover the root drivers of their migraines and follow a step-by-step plan to dramatically reduce the frequency by up to 90% without adding more medication or taking a bunch of supplements. So we built her personal migraine map, followed the plan, and now she will get 1 to 2 migraines per year, which she uses ibuprofen to treat if she needs to, versus up to 15 to 20 per month when we first started working together that weren't responding well to any medication. She just reached out to tell me that she got a promotion at work, she's on top of her career again, and has been able to come off all of her migraine medication. But most importantly, she's a confident mom again, and she's attending birthday parties at Jump Zone with her kids and saying yes instead of saying maybe later. I've worked with women like Beth from all over the United States who were told, this is the best we can do. but they were still willing to dig deeper. So if you're serious about changing your migraine story, go to drlesliecaesar.com/apply or tap the link in the show notes. And on our free consult, we'll map out why your migraines keep coming back and the first 3 steps you can take over the next 30 days. I do cap new client spots each month, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. But if you're done feeling helpless and ready to do the work to heal, pause this episode for 30 seconds and book that consult call now. Okay, Dr. Leslie, this all makes sense. What are the 3 things I need to do to fix this problem? And I'm going to disappoint you because there are no 3 steps that I can lay out to you. Not because this isn't real clinical work, it absolutely is, but because this is the most individual part of healing. What I call the first and second principles. First principle is getting the nutrients that our cells need to our cells. The second principle is clearing metabolic waste material from those cells and from the body. Those first 2 principles are essentially meeting the baseline biological needs of the body, meeting the baseline biochemical needs of the body. The body has requirements and we met them. That part, I can map it, I can measure it, I can address it systematically. And I want to say this plainly. If you work on just the first and second principles and you never touch the third, you'll improve. You will probably improve pretty significantly. The toxin bucket will drain better. The nutrients will get where they need to go. The migraines may become less frequent, less severe. They probably will. And then you're going to plateau because the hole is still there. The drain is still open. The bucket is filling better than it was, but it's emptying faster than it should. You can do everything right at the biochemistry level and still not get where you want to go because this piece is still untouched. This is the piece that most approaches miss entirely because, like I say, there's no lab test for this, there's no supplement protocol for this, there's no food list for this. And it is, in my clinical experience, the difference between someone who goes from 20 migraines a month to 10 and someone who goes from 20 migraines a month to 1 or 2 a year. This is something else. When I work within the first and second principles, I'm working with the biochemistry. When I work within the third principle, I'm working with a human being. And no 2 human beings got their hole from the same place or carry it in the same way or need the same thing to start patching it up. This is dipping into the mystery of being a person. And I would be doing you a disservice if I handed you a checklist. What I can tell you is what it actually looks like. And for that, let me tell you about Laura. When I started working with Laura, she was having about 20 migraines a month. Okay, 20? That's pretty rough. She had a sense that work stress was involved, but let's face it, when you're having 20 migraines a month, you really can't pick up patterns. There's way too much static in the signal. Everything is noise. So when we started working together and her biochemistry started coming around, the toxin bucket started getting drained, the first and second principles were being addressed, she got down to a lower level migraine about every week to 10 days. So significant improvement. And then she had a particular stakeholder meeting at work and she got a bad migraine. Now, there was a signal. There was something that we could look at because what emerged, and I honestly don't remember exactly how we got there because this is how this work goes. You follow a thread. But what we got to is that it wasn't all stakeholder meetings. It was this particular stakeholder meeting, a quarterly meeting with older male leadership. And Laura was able to connect something. She had a mentor early in her career, an older man that she respected enormously, someone she had sort of put up on a pedestal, and she didn't want to disappoint him. And when she sat across from the men in that quarterly meeting, something in her nervous system was treating them like him. She traced that fear of disappointing back to her childhood, and she connected some dots. And here's what didn't happen. She did not resolve every wound from her childhood in one phone call, right? We didn't address, every single thing, but we addressed this particular aspect because it appeared to be tied to her migraines. What happened is that she saw it, she connected the dots, and she brought something unconscious into the light. So the next time that same stakeholder meeting came around, she did not get a migraine. So that's what this work looks like. Pattern recognition leading to conscious awareness. And sometimes that is enough. The thing that loses its grip once you can see it. Sometimes deeper work is needed, but seeing it is where it starts. Now, I want to say one more thing before I close, because I know some of you are listening to this thinking, okay, but my migraines aren't stress migraines. Mine are hormonal, mine are weather, mine are from missing a meal or too much sun or a bad night of sleep. This doesn't apply to me. And I want to push back on that. I have a client right now who has some very profound holes in her vitality bucket. Some really difficult dynamics in her marriage that have been draining her for a long time. And we've been doing this deep work on this together. And what she's starting to notice, what she came to me and told me recently, is that she's weathering physical stressors better than she used to. Running errands, doing yard work, household chores, watching her granddaughter. These are the types of physical exertion that, for someone with chronic migraines, can be enough to push the needle into the migraine zone. And she used to get migraines after doing those things. And now she doesn't, or at least right now, not as often, not as severe. Not because she changed her diet, not because she found the right supplement, because one of the holes in her vitality bucket is starting to get patched. And when that bucket holds more, when the drain slows, the needle has more to work with. It bounces back from a day of errands. It bounces back from yard work. The physical stressors that used to knock her flat are not hitting the same way anymore. Because here's what the compass needle means for you. When your needle is pointing north, when your vitality bucket is full, your body can weather stressors, all of them, physical ones. The barometric pressure dropping, the August sun, a meal missed, the hormonal shift before your period. These things push the needle down. But when you have real resiliency and vitality, your needle bounces back. You go to the beach. You get too much sun. You come home fine. You miss lunch. You eat when you can. No migraine. You get caught in a storm and you get soaked. It was just a storm. So this mental and emotional work does not just address so-called stress migraines. It fills the vitality bucket. It raises your floor. And a full vitality bucket is what allows you to live like a normal person, not someone wrapped in bubble wrap, not someone who has to control every variable, not someone who can't commit to plans because she never knows which day her body is going to take her out. If you have holes in your vitality bucket draining your resiliency faster than you can build it, it doesn't matter how carefully you manage your triggers. The bucket stays low. The needle stays close to your migraine zone. And any little thing, the sun, the storm, the missed meal, the hard meeting, tips it over and you get a migraine. So this is not about stress. This is about your capacity to be a human being in the world. So here's what I want to leave you with. I'm not telling you that you have the same dynamic my coworker had. I'm not telling you that you have the same pattern Laura had. This is the most individual part of healing. I really mean that. What I'm asking you is this. Do you have a hole in your vitality bucket? Somewhere in that list that I walk through. The conscientious one, the fixer, the over-giver, the one who needs the effort to be seen, the one who's always on alert. Did something land? If it did, that is worth paying attention to because it's not your fault. You're not broken. These patterns developed for a reason. They got you through something. They may have been the thing that kept you sane in an environment that wasn't. But if you're no longer in that environment and the pattern is still running, there's a mismatch. And that mismatch is draining you. It's not about letting it go. That's not the work. The work is understanding why it's there. And when you understand that, things start to change. The needle gets to stay north a little bit longer and a little bit more often. The vitality bucket stops draining, and the sun and the storm and the missed meal, they stop being things you have to hide from. Every client of mine who has been willing to go on that journey has found it worth it. And not just because their migraines improved, but because they understood themselves better, because they healed from things that needed to be healed, physically, mentally, emotionally. That's what's possible. If you're living with chronic migraines and you're ready to understand what's actually driving them and what you can do about them, I'd love to talk. I offer a free consultation call. Link is in the description. And we'll talk about your migraines, any other health conditions you have, and we'll put together a game plan to get you feeling better. It's going to be the best 30 minutes you've spent on your health in a long time. So thanks so much for being here today. If this episode resonated, please share it, because we're trying to get real information into the hands of migraine sufferers who need it. I'll talk to you next time. See you soon.